Okay. All right. Welcome back. Are we? Oh, good. There's Professor Kong. Yeah, I was hoping you would join us. You're very big on the screen. You're as you should be, as Kongza should be. So we have only until up until 11:20. So we'll have to kind of move through this quickly. And I don't want to. I would like to have some time to open to the audience. I think that would be. There hasn't been as much time for that as previously. But I do have a couple of very quick questions, just one for each panelist. In some ways, a kind of reflection about what was going on. So I think one of the themes that came up in my own mind of listening to the three presentations this morning was thinking cross-culturally about different religious traditions and the way that they are engaging with bioengineering, bioethics, and these questions. In Professor Somparn Prompta's presentation, you had an intriguing line about how theistic religions tend to forestall engagements with bioengineering. And then seemed to say that Buddhism had a particular role to play in thinking about that. And my own thinking about that, there's a kind of interesting irony, perhaps, and that is that in spite of its own victimization by genetic thinking and some of the issues related to bioengineering, the one religious tradition that's perhaps been the most open to bioengineering is in fact Judaism. And so I'd like to hear you think a little or reflect a little bit about Buddhism is vis-a-vis these other traditions. And so one of the reasons why Judaism has been particularly open is that it has an idea that people, those of us on earth, are co-creationists with God and therefore are enhancing the work of the original creation. In fact, so it's not going against those principles, but is actually open to certain forms of enhancement. So just open with that as a quick question to you. And I think what I'll do is just throw some things out and people can respond if they like or reflect on it in any way. And Professor Kong, a very inspiring talk that you gave. The one aspect of it I was hoping you'd reflect on, given your own role both as a scientist, but as I introduced you as an artist as well, and is to think a little bit about, or say something, reflect a little bit on the intersection or even the intriguing ways in which science, particularly at the cutting edge now of the frontiers and looking to the future, is in some ways very akin to art. And just even thinking about the products that you were showing us that had been produced by students and others. So what is the nature of the intersection between science and art? Art in a similar way is trying to produce that which has never existed before. This art is in its kind of best forms of something that is completely new, and when it's doing, I think, the most interesting work. And then Professor Jasanoff, the thing that I'm so glad you brought back society, law, governance back into the picture explicitly. And what it made me think about here was and you ended with asking or kind of inviting then Buddhism to be more of a partner in the discussions about questions of ethics, morality, and all of this. And we, in the U.S. at least, have this problem. And I had been inspired by a book by a woman named Winifred Sullivan, who wrote a book called The Impossibility of Religious Freedom, which was making the claim, that there's an inability in the U.S. to have a true religious freedom because of the diversity of religious views and the fact that primarily U.S. law is guided by Protestant concerns that have steered law, and that in fact there's a kind of a semblance of what we might think of as religious freedom, but in fact it's hemmed in by the constraints of an overly Protestant view of religion in the U.S. and how that's inflected in law. So can Buddhism ever have a voice in making changes or even making real changes, and I mean in terms of law, society. I mean, I was thinking about, there was a movie that came out some years ago called The Dharma Brothers, about the use of mindfulness and things in prisons, and it seemed to be very effective. And then the conservative religious right stepped in and fought against that, and it was removed out of the prison system. And made it illegal for them to do that within the prison system. So just throw out in other words, what can be the role of another tradition, but when it comes into contact with the certain constraints that are maybe not explicit, but certainly implicitly part of legal system. So let me just throw those kind of three things out, and then we can open it up for a more general discussion. So why don't we begin just with Professor Prompta, and you can respond in any way you like.
Oh yeah, the one thing that I have observed in this conference is we have talked much about the scientific information, but we have talked less about the implication of the scientific information which is related to Buddhist teaching. Personally, in my opinion, when we talk about the influence of science concerning the life of people, and we would like to respond to this phenomena from the perspective of Buddhist philosophy. One thing that I have observed is that we would like to talk about the perspective of Buddhism from the thing that I call the ethics for individual. So we talk about the karma, we talk about the nibbana, we talk about something which is the major term in Buddhism. But my interest is how this Buddhist term be applied in terms of the social ethics. I think Buddhists in the Buddhist country do not like to talk about the influence of Buddhist teaching in terms of the social ethics. And my personal interest is I would like to develop the thing which I call the Buddhist social ethics to make a Buddhist idea relevant to the growth of scientific advancement. Yes.
Good. In a sense, that was one of the questions that Professor Jasanoff was pointing to towards the end of her talk. Professor Kong, art, creativity, and creation?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So I think art and science, of course, are interconnected along with technology. And I mentioned briefly in introducing the Media Lab, we explore science, technology, and also art and design. So please come to the lab and visit us. We'd love to have you. I think science in many ways is about trying to understand phenomena of the universe, the physical world. It's about knowledge. Technology is often utilitarian with a goal and a purpose and a function. Art can be just about creativity and expression. And, again, as an artist, I'm a musician, photographer, and again, I love engaging in different types of creative expression. There doesn't have to be any purpose. It can just be for joy, for any kind of emotional connection. And so I think one kind of concept that does underlie science and art is creativity. So creativity is necessary for expression, for artistic expression, and also for scientific exploration. And so all of those ideas are connected. I'll briefly mention there's a science art project that we worked on at the lab for many years called Biota Beats, where it was born at a community center that I used to run, where we were thinking about interesting combinations of different domains. And again, I'm a DJ as well, and so a student as part of our community, looked at the DJ turntable and said, "Hey, what if we did a project combining DJing and the microbiome? So the trillions of microorganisms that are part of the human body." And we created a project, an art science project called Biota Beats, where we would swab different microorganisms from the body and then take that data and then sonify that data to create music. So you could literally listen to the music of your own microbiome. And so there was an artistic part of like, oh, what does my microbiome sound like? But then even a diagnostic part, right? If you're the music of your own biota beats, if the music of your own microbiome is changing, maybe you have dysbiosis, maybe you have some kind of shift in your microbiome that's actually measurable through this musical signature change. And we did an even bigger project with one of our collaborators, Jaylen Brown. He's a basketball player from the Celtics in Boston. And we went and had young people that are part of a youth program that we created go swab objects all around the city of Boston. And then we did metagenomic sequencing of those objects and created the biota beat of the city of Boston. So you could literally listen to the musical microbiome of the city. So, projects like that to me are really exciting. They get, especially young people, excited about science who might not be interested in it. They might think, oh, I like music, but I don't care about science. But all of a sudden, no, if you could have a music related to your own microbiome, that suddenly changes the dynamic and you get a lot more engagement that way. So anyways, I think there's a lot of opportunities to explore science and art and creativity together.
Right. And also just bringing in Buddhism and creativity as well. I think this is one of the areas where some leading artists and one of the reasons I was asking it is just how do, in terms of scientists, how to make, or what is it that prepares or helps to condition one to be able to have these breakthroughs or to be able to think beyond the paradigms that exist. And I remember some years ago, Herbie Hancock came to give the presidential lectures at Harvard, and one of his lectures was on Buddhism and creativity, and he was discussing, he was a Nichiren chanter, and was describing about how when he was hitting blocks in terms of creativity, he would turn to Buddhism and chanting as a way to push that forward. So bringing that into the mix is also, I think, quite interesting.
Very, very quickly, I agree with that so deeply. I think whenever I need to do anything creative, and it could be even related to preparing this talk, actually, I meditate. I go into meditation and I really try to create a space of nothingness and spaciousness so that creativity can emerge. That's a key part of my own practice. So I totally agree. And yeah, I love Herbie Hancock, so it was a great reference.
Okay, thank you very much. And Professor Jasanoff? Sorry to be so rushed, everyone.
When I try to be creative, I sometimes think I have to go to sleep. But
that's what happens to me when I meditate.
To each her own. James, I think that the question is not really about is it possible to have religious freedom in the United States, but what do we take to be freedom, and what do we take to be the right balance between freedom and constraint, given that there can't be a working society in which there are not both of those principles working. We're living in a time in the US when a lot of people are saying that constitutional law has been taken over by Catholicism, not by Protestantism, because of the supermajority of Catholics on the Supreme Court, and Catholics representing a particularly conservative view of Catholicism on top of it. And there are different areas of private life that arguably have been taken over by different religious traditions in America, whether it's evangelicalism or Catholicism, or even a kind of self-righteous Protestantism. I'm sure that you can recognize in the gender politics of the last few years a certain kind of orthodoxy setting in. And non-Americans point to America as being, in some ways, the most socially conditioned and non-free society that they know. It's the society of mass production. It's the society of forcing people into a kind of Rawlsian equivalence in order to have a public sphere at all. So, we see the elephant and we look at its pieces. So if we're religious studies scholars, we tend to attribute many of the ills we see to something about religious belief. But to me, it's more important to think about organized forms of thought as coherent belief systems that have put the questions in different ways from other ones. And therefore, for me, a confirmed secularist, if you think of Buddhism as that kind of a tradition with an enormous history and deep reflection of its own, but not draw the distinction between, what is secular constitutional law and what is Buddhist law, but put them into conversation, I think you might end up with redefinitions of freedom to suit the conditions of the moment, different ideas of where it's legitimate to impose constraints and where not, what should be a matter of personal choice and what could not or should not be? I mean, these are eternal questions. I think societies change and are creative partly because we're constantly asking about our own position in the cosmos and what meaning does it have. So, right now we are in the grips of a regressive moment in American politics, at least if regression means that degrees of freedom are being rubbed out, that we had come to accept as a birthright. I think that it's important for all of these different traditions that have wrestled with that set of questions to figure out how best to talk to one another. And even if we can't achieve the Lisa Jardine kind of nirvana of then we will all be able to talk to one another, which is very Brit and not so American. Nevertheless, I mean, ways of reaching across these divides and really understanding where somebody else's notions of what constitutes a freedom of choice come from, I think that would be a way forward.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I'm just asking is we have a conference like this and have many ideas that we throw around and people are thinking about these issues, but what is the real possibilities for action, implementation, persuasion, and what are the limits of that as well? I'm going to break Aoife's rule here. Well, interestingly, Fa in Chinese means the Buddha Dharma, but it also means law. And so I'm going to go, in her name, actually, Venerable Aoife's name is to be in accordance with the Dharma or the law, but I'm going to break the law here and go overtime for just a minute, just so we can, if we can have two, at the most, questions from the audience, if there are some, I'd like to still do that before we wrap up here. I know it's been very fast, and so I think Venerable Mingbao in the back has a question. Sorry, Aoife.
谢谢主持人。好，等一下，好，我们希望你帮我翻译。那么目前有4个问题，这个4个问题就是
我们世界只有一个问题啊。
好，第一个问题，
对，
释迦牟尼佛在菩提树下那一刹那成为佛陀，为什么前一刹那不是佛陀呢？第二个问题，释迦牟尼佛在菩提树下成佛那一刹那，他是体会什么，明白什么，称为佛呢？第三个问题，释迦牟尼佛所体会的成佛那一刹那的内容，我们有没有呢？第四个问题，佛陀成佛那一刹那，他有胚胎吗？那么他的胚胎又是什么呢？好，谢谢主持人。
还是有4个问题啊。
好，谢谢主持人。
I think everybody has the RG.
Okay, 我简单。
Okay.
Should I translate it just very briefly? Okay.
Very briefly.
The question is that when Buddha become Buddhist, okay, the moment he become Buddhist, what is really happening? Do we know what is happening? And does something happening? And does he has an embryo?
Well, one response to that is that what is happening is a matter of what we have historicized it as being. I mean, I have visited that tree myself in an attempt to at least recover something about the circumstances. And when you do, you meditate on it. I mean, you meditate on it in the same way that when you go into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and see the slab from which Christ is supposed to have risen, you see all kinds of hands being laid on the holy spot and people consecrating it all over again with their understandings. I mean, I think coming out of a Hindu tradition, although totally secularized, I am inculcated into the sentence Sambhavami Yuge Yuge, which is I'm made possible or I appear from age to age. And I think that that's true of all belief systems, that it's not stuck somewhere in thousands of years back, but gains meaning and gains richness through these kinds of conversations. So that's why I prefer not to ask what is something, but what is at stake and understanding it in this way, with a door left wide open for different answers to become possible as we move forward.
And just in terms of Professor Kong's talk, and creativity and creation, I mean, one could say, the Buddha, Shakyamuni, had insight that had never been thought before. This was a completely new way of an insight into the fundamental functioning of the way the universe is, and so therefore, yes, this is a kind of a completely unthought of understanding of the truth of things. Let's see, we have time, or Ifa's.
Okay. Professor Kong, can I ask you, is it possible MIT make a gold? Gold, G-O-D.
A god.
No, gold. Because we have artificial diamond.
Gold, G-O-L-D.
Yeah, gold.
Gold, okay.
Yeah. 金子，能够做金子吗？
金子，可以做金子吗？
Yeah.
Very interesting question. Do you mean like in an alchemic process, like alchemy, like converting something into gold?
Yeah.
That is a very, very interesting question. I don't know. I might have to defer to my material science colleagues for that question about gold. But I take a deeper kind of reflection on gold, and even the remarks earlier from the previous question. We're living in a moment now where we have rapidly, explosively developing artificial intelligence, the ability to design organisms, genomes, powering those with artificial intelligence, and also automated systems like robotics. So the capacity to create synthetic materials to even make gold, I think something like that is, you could imagine. You could imagine almost anything at this point. And I really appreciate Sheila's comments about, it's not necessarily important the technical debate on the definitions of things, but more the larger impact on the society and the larger social outcomes. And so I think the power to create new beings, the power to create gold, we are entering a phase of different and increasingly powerful capabilities. And I think my deeper concern is there's technological power, but then there's also moral and ethical power, or moral and ethical rigor, or kind of deeper reflection about our own value systems and our own ethics. And so I personally would prefer that we invest in our values and our ethics, so that if we choose to create gold, we can do so from a place of harmony and compassion. And I think that's been reflected in a lot of the comments today in this panel. But we are moving in directions societally where we have incredible power and a lot of depravity and scarcity when it relates to some of the values and ethics that we should be cultivating.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think that's a fine place to both end due to the substance, but also because of the time. And so thank the panelists of this final panel of this conference for very rich and interesting talks. And I think that's all for this one. But thank you all very much. And let's please give a round of applause for the panelists. Okay, so Venerable...
It's okay. You can sit there when James give a conclusion. It's okay.
It's not a conclusion, I can guarantee you that. But so I always get surprised by Venerable Ifa, who asks for different things, and here I am. I actually don't have any grand concluding comments, but just a few words to say, kind of reflecting on the last couple of days here. So we have had this incredibly rich discussion, I think, about the intersection here between Buddhism and bioengineering. And there are so many different topics that are possibilities of what we could engage with. And I think one of the things that I've noticed, at least over the last couple of days here, is that we could spend a lot of time thinking about the ways that bioengineering, other topics in science have connections to the Buddhist past and what we know from the Buddhist tradition. Clearly, we could do that for a very long time. But I think we also need to think about the limitations of what we're doing here as well. And I think you've noticed it in terms of we have different paradigms, different theories within the scientific fields, and among the Buddhologists, we would argue about things as we did. And in fact, I was thinking about Professor In-Soo Hyun's bringing up of the Harvard glass flowers. In a sense, that, for me, crystallized, so to speak, some of the problems that we have of engaging in this kind of both cross-cultural but cross-disciplinary dialogue. In a sense, those glass flowers, how beautiful they are and how maybe important they were even for certain types of research, had no relationship to the types of flowers they were at all. In fact, they are a kind of an ideal type, that they have no correlate in the natural world except for certain general characteristics. And in a way, what we have been doing in some ways is creating glass flowers of science and of Buddhism in taking away, I think, or there's a danger, I think, of taking away some of the diversity and the problems of translation. I was talking to Ben a little bit about this, the kind of languages and terminology we use as part of that discussion. So for example, and I think Sheila brought this up yesterday in the final panel, is that, you know, Buddhist studies scholars have become attuned to speaking of Buddhism only in the plural of Buddhisms. And, you know, we could jump around and talk about a Theravada, you know, conceptions of things. We could talk about Mahayana ones or Tibetan ones. But Buddhists have active debates about all of these questions, about karmic causality, about what it constitutes valid cognition, about all of these questions that have come up, sentience and all of this. And if we just pick and choose, we can then begin to do some of the, you know, connections to science. But you know, what does it mean to sort of flatten things out, if you will? I think that's something we need to think about, and perhaps not just get into the kind of questioning about correspondences or complementarities, but also think about the productive value of thinking about the tensions that are there as well. And then, you know, we finally got to the point, and when we are dealing with these heavy topics here, where ethics and where the real life implications of the discussions that we're having, not just at the level of ideas, and what role can Buddhism really play in this? On the one hand, I think what we've seen is that Buddhism, because none of this would have, you know, the things that we're talking about could not have been conceived at the time when the Buddha lived. We're dealing with new technologies, new issues that have come up. Clearly, some of the questions we can say have similarities with issues that the Buddha was touching on, but these are new problems, new issues that are happening at an ever faster pace. So is Buddhism something that is just reactive to its time in dealing with new things that come up? Or can we turn it, as we've heard in this final panel, to actually think of the ways that Buddhism can be more active in its guiding of thinking at the levels of ethics and morality and in terms of dealing with the new technologies, new developments that are future-oriented and will continue to be. I thought one of the interesting things in Professor Kong's talk was that, yes, we're moving forward into the future, to an unknown future where things will always change. Yet he talked about looking into the past. I forget what the title of it was, something, the archaic future, or something like that. And that, to me, is a very interesting thing, or even a possibility for Buddhism, which isn't to say just looking for complementarities with the tradition, but what are some of the resources within the Buddhist path that we can think with, not just to apply them or to compare them, but actually what are some tools that are within the Buddhist tradition that we can use in the present. And this is something that has been done, I think, for some time already in other fields, for example, in thinking about the relationship to the natural world. And there was a moment for something that was called deep ecology, of trying to reach into the past to look at some of the resources within East Asian traditions to to respond to contemporary ways of thinking about the environment and climate change and things like that. What would that look like for the questions we've been dealing with about bioengineering and ethics and things like that? So I'll just end with that, is just to throw out just one final comment there, just about thinking of ways that we can engage with these two disciplines, two traditions, if you will, productively as we go forward, and inevitably this is going to continue as science continues to develop, and Buddhism will remain around. So I think this will be an ongoing productive discussion, I think. And thank you, Aoife, for bringing us all together to begin these conversations at least, and extend some of the thinking from last year, which was about AI. And my own feeling is it's a necessary move in the sense, I think, if I didn't attend last year, but in terms of thinking about machines and AIs and computers, as much as we've grappled with consciousness, there's a difference between thinking about the computer or AI machine as just something which is a calculating machine or quantifying machine that can deal with patterns and all of that. Seems to me to be rather different than the kinds of questions that came up this year, where biology comes into the picture as a living organism that's not a thing in itself, but is something that is a process that is constantly transforming over time. And it seems to me a thing or a machine, and maybe I'm wrong here, but can that, and I'm a little bit hesitant to say this after Professor Kong's talk, is can a machine, have that same development or growth, transformation on its own without outside input? So anyway, interesting, I think, extension of what the conversations that happened last year on AI. So thank you very much, Aoife, for being the instigator.
Thank you, James. Good conclusion. Thank you so much.